What's up, Visionary? I am Cleve Davis, your vision actualization mentor, back with another episode to help you break down your vision building barriers. Today, we are talking about wellness and well-being in its entirety, what it is, and how to maintain it as a visionary. So what is wellness and why does it pertain to you? Wellness is the state of being in good health. More specifically, well-being is the state of being happy, healthy, or prosperous. I would like to say happy, healthy, and prosperous. This pertains to you because who wouldn't want to be happy, healthy, and prosperous? I know I will want to be. The truth is, you are better able to build your vision when you are in a state of wellness physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You cannot properly build while in an unhealthy state. If you try, the experience is longer, harder, and less enjoyable. I don't want that for you. Building your vision is supposed to be an experience you love, even if it's hard. The problem is, a lot of us visionaries struggle with wellness and the pursuit of success, living in harmony. The great news is, you don't have to pick one or the other. I brought on the show Chivon John, a wellness coach and the global wellness specialist for the international e-commerce giant, Shopify. Chivon gives us a quick breakdown of what I call a visionary wellness program in our discussion. I know you want to be happy, healthy, and prosperous, so hang around and enjoy this episode. So next, our visionary profile, please.
Loading. Visionary profile. Chivon John. Location, Ontario, Canada. Occupation, Global Wellness Specialist at Shopify. Wellness coach and public speaker. Billboard quote: be the person that you needed when you were younger. For weekly visionary value, subscribe to the show. Enjoy.
Up a little bit more before the well-being coach, before the speaking events, before you get acquired by Shopify because they realized how amazing you were. What made you go into this well-being space and self-care and also business twist with it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Now everything is kind of in alignment of self-care, well-being, events, and different things. But, I think all of that started, and what kind of drives me is really being the person that I needed when I was younger. So I think my well-being journey really came as a result of struggling with my own wellness over the years. Grew up experiencing and living with depression, anxiety, with suicidal thoughts, fortunately not succumbing to a suicide attempt. So there's all these different things that I was experiencing as I was growing up, and even just in periods of adulthood as well too. Mm-hmm. Mental health is a spectrum and a journey. And I think for me, I had some turning points where, through getting help with working through my mental health challenges, but then also my first step into the wellness world came through fitness. And it was a way to kind of help me just feel a little bit better, work through some different challenges. It was kind of an escape from work at the time. And it just opened my eyes to, just what health and wellness could look like beyond just getting fit to look a certain way. Yeah. I discovered kind of like holistic living in an amazing community. And from there, it just kind of piqued my curiosity, but also just my desire to turn inward. And from there, just like learning how I was feeling better myself, I just became inspired to share what I was doing, and share just my personal journey. And from there, that's what I started blogging, and then eventually growing an audience and how I'm hosting events, making a decision to go to school and get specific coaching on personal training and well-being coaching. But essentially, it really started from me just wanting to heal a lot of things that were going on in my life. And really what keeps me going is to, remember that person who was struggling with their wellness, to be better for that person and to hopefully inspire others. So it just really came from just kind of like, sometimes you teach the things you want to learn.
Yeah. No, that's like exactly what I'm doing here. That's exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's really important. I think because of people like you, wellness, as far as a holistic view of it, is becoming more mainstream and more like common knowledge now, as far as just like mental health and all. Like we work out to get fit and we work on our business to, make it grow. But then it's like, how come we just don't exercise like our mind or exercise, our spirit or things like that? Like we kind of just leave those like, they will take care of themselves. Exactly. And that's not true. No. It's not true. And I feel like visionaries, especially because we're so focused on where we're trying to go, we kind of just forget, that we still have to take care of ourselves. Like that's not once we get there, if we're not intact ourselves, we still won't feel right.
Absolutely. It's like it's basically you're working so hard to climb the ladder of success. Yeah. But if you're not taking care of yourself, you'll realize you climbed that ladder and that ladder was leaning against the wrong wall, meaning like you are just ascending up to something and that you don't even want the thing that you were working so hard for, or even that you just don't even feel mentally strong enough to perceive it or, accept it. So it's so important to ensure that, that we're taking care of ourselves, that we're as vigilant as we are on our work, our businesses, our passion projects, in the way that we show up for others. We have to be that way for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, like, no matter how much time we spend with other people or how much time we spend on the work that we do, we are always with ourselves 100% of the time, so it's so important to make sure that we're checking in with how we're doing, that we're focusing on how we're feeling, we're checking in with ourselves, we're taking care of our bodies, and our minds, that the journey of life has its ups and downs, no matter, how positive outlook we have, there's things that will sort of, challenge us, and that's normal. So it's important for us to just focus on building that inner resilience and remembering that no work, project, business, big vision is worth it if you do not feel mentally well and strong to be able to really enjoy the things that you're seeking to create.
Right. And there's a spectrum of people, that the listeners, I feel like there's a spectrum. There's people who know, I've been neglecting myself. I have been, not taking care. I've been not getting enough sleep. I've been doing all this because I've been working so hard. And then there's other people, they're like, I'm fine. No, I'm good. I only need 5 hours. And I feel like there's a spectrum of people who kind of are aware and people who just maybe aren't aware or the severity of it. So, what are some signs that people could look for, like to see like, okay, am I actually doing the best job I can of taking care of myself so that I could provide the best value in whatever I'm trying to create?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think that like one of the best ways that we can practice self-care and even just being on a wellness journey is like, I feel like self-awareness is self-care. I think when we think of self-care, we think of like yoga, bubble baths, and all these different things. It's like the very commoditized versions of it. But like really at its core, it's like having a strong sense of self-awareness, right? So a lot of the things that you mentioned, that there is a spectrum of different things. Like I know some people who can just kind of operate in like these seasons of hustle where, they can get a lot of stuff done and then they just take, deliberate periods of rest. Whereas some other folks are like, I have to make sure that I'm getting like my 8 hours of sleep every day in order to function. So I think it's important to just understand like, what are the things that energize you and what are the things that deplete your energy? Like just really cultivating a lot of that self-awareness for yourself. Like what are the things that do not absolutely work for you? Like for me, I know like I have have to prioritize having rest and making sure that I have like my workouts on a regular basis, and that the team sleep no mentality is just not going to work for me. Like having like these long, periods of, working myself to exhaustion, I don't thrive in that way.
Me either.
Right. So I think like just having that sense of self-awareness, like just learning, it's, checking in and understanding like, who am I, like what works for me, because what might work for me may not work in the exact same way as somebody else. I think as well, other different signs as well is just looking at your, I would say like burnout is really a state of it is a prolonged state of stress, right? So there's good stress, like it's just eustress, which is the things that we all thrive on, right? We all need a period of stress to kind of like motivate us. That's the thing that kind of energizes us into action. Where it becomes a problem is if you're in that sustained level of stress for a very long time, right, to the point that it really breaks down, your body. You become super exhausted. You also lose that level of enthusiasm. So the same kind of enthusiasm that might have inspired you to get things done, you're now finding that that's completely gone, and that you're sort of in this state of like apathy, maybe a bit of anger, resentment. Your mood starts to change. So for those folks who might be working hard, but that enthusiasm is still there, they understand and they have that kind of awareness of like, okay, I'm going to need a break soon. But where it's on the flip side of people who might be in that sustained piece, but like, their energies are low, maybe their mood is changing, maybe their work level quality has been dropping. That's when you kind of have to start looking into like, hey, maybe there's some physical signs and emotional signs that might be happening and changing in that respect too. So I would say like there's kind of physical and emotional signs of when like to be aware of when you might be impacting your well-being. But that's why it's so key to be clued in and not just be on autopilot, because it's so easy for us to just use our work as a way to kind of numb our emotions. Like, oh, I'm fine, I'll just worry about it later. You have to stay checked in of what's happening. And that's where I feel like a big part of just practicing self-care and focusing on your well-being is like really stepping up and having that emotional intelligence and knowing yourself and knowing, what energizes you and what depletes you.
So this question popped in my head. Sometimes when people say, self-awareness, you have to know what works for you and what doesn't. I guess, is it as simple as just sitting down and with your notebook and thinking, well, what works for me? Or is it like, do you have to kind of do an experiment on yourself? Like you have like the control variable, well, okay, this is what the time I'm going to wake up and start doing my work. But this time I'll keep going until however late, and then but I'll continue waking up at the same time. Like, do you have to do that kind of like trial periods on yourself? Or is it just something that you kind of have to just, well, I know I don't like to wake up early, or, you know?
No, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is like trial. For me personally, it's like trial and error and seeing, like, I know for some folks, like there's lots of different articles as well about you have to work out or wake up at 5 a.m. to be successful and things like that. And a lot of times it could, it depends. Like I know some people who are just great and get a lot of stuff done who wake up at 9 o'clock. Right. So I think I would say it's not about just like blindly doing about like, following certain rules, but trying it out to see for yourself if that's something that works for you. Like I wouldn't write off something right off the bat. Like I like to be able to just give it a shot and see what works personally, to get a sense of, does this something that I enjoy? And I would also say, just personally, I've gone to I worked with like a therapist, and I still go to therapy. So I find that process is helpful in just kind of getting me to, unravel and notice like the different thought patterns that I have. So for instance, from, experiencing levels of anxiety and just have gone through burnout and, periods of like overthinking, one of the things that I really like to focus on consistently is just like paying attention to what is like the thought patterns that are happening in my mind all the time, right? Because like a lot of times we can sit a lot in our head and we can ruminate about different things. So one of the things that I like to do, rather than just kind of, have these different thoughts kind of spiraling, I like to take a moment to just write down, what am I actually noticing? What do I actually need right now? What am I resisting? Just kind of writing things out and just kind of questioning the different things that I'm sort of ruminating in my mind
Okay, cool. And there's another aspect of this that I kind of want to get into that I think is very interesting, at least for me. Building your vision is something that takes time. It's something that takes a lot of effort. And sometimes you can't, I mean, you hear Gary Vee saying, I didn't have my 20s. You know, I was working. I was working all the time. I didn't hang out with my friends. So when it comes to social life, I find myself, you know, personally, I don't mind staying in the house and working, and my friends would go out, and I'm just like, I'm good. I mean, I'd rather do this. Like, I have more fun working on my business. But sometimes I'm like, is that a good balance? Should I go out, or should I, you know, is this taking away from? Is this going to make my vision building process take longer if I keep, you know, spending time with friends? And then, so I'm kind of like, Is there what do you think is the best way to go about it with the social life aspect?
So that's a great question, because like I do think that it's important to, obviously, if you have a vision and you have like whatever that is, it's a business, a project, something that you're trying to build, it does require some sacrifice. You know, like there are going to be some moments where you're going to have missed some family outings or that time with friends or some different things. And I think what was interesting is what you said is that you're okay with like saying no sometimes to different things. And that's fine, right? Like, I think where there's a conflict for some folks is like if there are folks who want to be able to have that balance a little bit stronger. And I think that's why it's so important to, you know, have a clear definition of what is success for you. Because maybe what you're wanting to do is totally fine. And somebody else might be like, you know what, I want to be able to have more time with my friends, but I'm okay if this is going to take a little bit longer. Right. So I think that's where your values and your definition of success really comes into play. Because if someone's like, you know what, I want to, you know, not sacrifice my Sunday brunch with some friends, and I'm okay if this means that, you know, that time that I could have spent doing this is going to take me a little bit longer. Whereas somebody might be like, you know what, you know, that's not what is working for me. But I think above all, it is important to prioritize some type of connection in our lives, no matter if you're, you know, okay with, you know, saying no to going out with friends or not. I think a lot of times when we think about like the whole social life, we think of just of it in the extreme of like, okay, I'm just going to spend all my time with my friends and I'm going to leave my business aside. And I think you can have a little bit of that balance, right? Like, I think there's times when you have to be like, you know what, I'm going to be focused. And there's other times where, you know, you want to make sure that you are making some intentional points to stay connected to, whether it be friends or family. Because I think there's some value in having those periods and those times. Like there's Brene Brown is an author that I really love and who has a great book called Braving the Wilderness. And she talks a lot about belonging. And she defines connection as like that energy that exists when people feel seen, heard, and valued. So I just feel like no matter what you decide to do, like, you know, on your journey, whether you want to just go all in and have like, you know, I'm fine with no like outing times or not. I think we all need connection. You know, I think that piece is super important, and in whatever form that looks like. I think sometimes we think, okay, well, we're connected on social media, but you can be connected to lots of people online, but not actually be connected to anybody, if that makes sense, right? So I do feel that like we should be prioritizing some type of connection because that impacts our well-being. We need to be able to feel like we're seen and we're heard. And my only concern is when people are just like completely cocooning themselves is like, are you still having those moments of connection? So I definitely think it's important to just, you know, to create what your definition of success looks like, what your values are, and not always think about social life in the extremes of like all or nothing.
I think that cocooning method as well is something that kind of contributes to the burnout. I feel like if you cut yourself off too much, you're going to get, you don't have any way to replenish, you know? I think a part of like wellness, sometimes we think it's just about the mental health and the physical health, but there's like our social and relational health. Like
think about the times when we spend with friends and family, how energizing that can feel, assuming you're obviously spending time with people who energize you.
Yeah. Hopefully you like them.
Hopefully you like them. Hopefully, making sure that you're spending it with the right people, not just any people. But that's important. Like there was a great article, I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, about the epidemic of loneliness, right? Like loneliness contributes to our mental well-being, our physical well-being. It creates stress. So when I think of being social and connection in that lens, and not of it just being like, hey, I'm just throwing my stuff to the side, like it's all about just being intentional about like, okay, I know there's going to be various points where I'm going to have to be focused, and I'm okay with maybe saying, declining certain things. Like I don't go out to everything. I'm very intentional about where I want to spend my time, but also realizing that I don't want to cut everything off completely, because those moments of connection also help amplify my well-being as well.
I'm going off script a little bit here, but this just popped in my head because we were talking about the social wellness as well. So, of course, the term that pops in my head is 2019 is social media.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how often this topic comes up with, what you do with Shopify or with your clients. But social media and well-being have had this very strained relationship. Yeah. And I just wondering, we're kind of in this document everything type of phase, especially if you're building something, because you want awareness of what you're doing. But just, something I hear a lot is I spend too much time on my phone. Like it's taking away from what I'm trying to do. But also the phone, social media is such an important aspect of building networks and finding inspiration and all these different things that also play into what we want to do. So I'm like, man, is it possible to get the best of both worlds? It's dangerous territory.
It definitely can be. And I think where social media can be, like, obviously from the things that you mentioned, where there's like the shadow side of obviously spending a lot of time on our phones, falling down the comparison trap of following different people or just scrolling through different feeds. I don't know if this is completely even like rolled out across the board at Instagram, but like in Canada, we've started rolling out removing the likes, for instance.
Yeah, I heard about that. I definitely heard about that in Canada.
So that's rolled out. I have it on my profile now. And you do notice a difference because you're not focusing in on the numbers of like what people are getting on their different posts. I think that social media can be with anything, like if we're using it in a way where we are getting lost in being like comparing ourselves, if we're following people who are making us feel, bad about ourselves. So I think it's like important when we're on social media just to be super intentional about like, who are you following? How much time are you spending on social media? So for me personally, I like to be able to ensure that whoever I'm following are people that, are inspiring me in some way or actually teaching me something. And I'm not following just things that are going to make me feel either bad about myself or compare myself in a certain way. Like I'm not opposed to muting content, even if it's somebody I might know. Like sometimes you might see somebody who's doing something really cool or like even a bit distracting and, hit the mute button. Muting is self-care sometimes.
How does that work? I'm not the best, with all the technicals.
Instagram? So on Instagram, you can actually like click on someone's story profile, like their little profile picture, and you can mute their stories. So you don't see any of their stories.
Oh, shoot. I didn't even know you could do that.
So that's like because like stories can be very distracting sometimes, right? And like, if someone posts too much, or maybe if they're posting something where you're just like, I don't want to see this right now, or, you can mute them and it doesn't unfollow them. They don't know that you've muted them. Oh, wow. And once you're good, you can unmute them or you can keep them permanently muted, right? So just like, I find it isn't like as like, someone who's building a business or, you want to create your own personal brand or a platform. it is important to be able to share what you're doing, but I think you can do so in a way where you ensure that it's not impacting you, because like I think you got to be super intentional about how you leverage social media, because it is possible to just go down this rabbit hole and this spiral of like, oh my goodness, look at this, what this person is doing, and like, why are they doing that? And I think also when those moments come up of those like, envy or comparison moments, you can mute and whatever, but sometimes I like to dive into that. And it's like, well, why is this coming up for me? Is it because this person is maybe doing something that I want to do? Or, just like, I kind of leverage that as a moment to sort of turn inward before I just kind of like sit and ruminate in all of those feelings. But I think it's so important, like, as we have all these different mediums to stay connected. LinkedIn has video now, like all these different things, just to be super intentional about who you follow and just like how you spend your time, and not be okay with, I need to take a break from this, or I need to mute this account, or I'm only going to go on, post my stuff, and then just like, leave and then maybe come back to engage, and that's it.
Yeah. I think it comes back down to that self-awareness thing. You got to know, what exactly is keeping you, what is making you discouraged, what's making you upset with how you're using the platforms. Even just knowing like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to go cold turkey, not spending time on my phone at all, but maybe I'll exchange, instead of me spending all this time on Instagram where I'm getting distracted, I'll go on LinkedIn instead, where I know I'll be definitely more productive, because that's just that type of environment. Or
exactly,
like you said with can you mute people's feeds too?
No. You can't mute their feeds. Yeah, like I don't think that's a thing yet, but you can mute the stories. For sure.
And for the likes thing in Canada, I saw it, and I was reading about it, but how exactly? I'm trying to remember. It's you can't see how many likes you're getting, or the person can't see how many likes.
So as like, for instance, if I'm posting a piece of content and I look at that content that I posted in my feed, I can't see the likes unless I go into the back end, and I can then see the number of likes. Somebody who's coming to my page also can't see the likes. Wow. So even if I'm scrolling on Instagram, I can't see likes for anything. Now it just says, it might say, so-and-so user plus others like this. So there's like, whereas before it would say 1,000 or 100 or whatever. It doesn't say that anymore.
That's interesting. On just the psychology, it might play on both sides with, the person posting. And also, I'm trying to think about how that affects the likers. Like, are you more prone to like something if you see a whole bunch of people like it?
Honestly, I never was. I was like talking to some people once this thing was like rolling out, and it was interesting how some folks were like, yeah, I don't want to like things if there was only 2 people like. I was like, really?
What?
I didn't know that was a thing. But apparently there are folks who didn't want to like a piece of content if it didn't have, whatever, quote unquote, that certain threshold of likes is. And I just never thought, I thought that was interesting. I'm like, if I like something, I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
But I guess that might help now where there's no likes. People are more, willing to just put, stamp their seal of approval on something, knowing that nobody can see. But I just thought that was very interesting, because personally, I was just like, well, it doesn't matter to me, but some people, so it is interesting from a psychology perspective.
Yeah. Now, talking to some of the listeners who may not still be convinced yet, this whole wellness thing is a whole bunch of baloney or stuff like that. I don't know. And they need to see the proof in the pudding. I know you've worked with a bunch of clients. I know you've worked with people, employees also of a major company. What are some of the benefits that you have clearly seen from people who have been more conscious about what they're doing with their well-being and how they're taking care of it?
I think one of the couple things that come to mind for me is just, and I'll also just talk from myself, from my also personal experience as well, is just like, I would say like a greater sense of confidence in myself.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like I just feel like once you start really taking the time to get to know you, to really start caring about you, because really what wellness is like the ultimate expression of just like care and self-love to yourself, you just feel just really, I know, like, just start feeling a bit more confident in yourself and start making just like better decisions. Right? Like, I'm more willing. I posted the other day on one of my profiles about, the importance of not breaking promises to yourself. Right. And I find that, like, especially as folks who are, ambitious and we're go-getters, we're probably not likely to break a promise to other people.
Right.
But,
exactly.
Right. But when it comes down to, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. And then you just are like, no, I'm not going to go.
Right.
And it's like, you're kind of, when you think about it, you're breaking a promise to yourself, but it's easy to sort of just sweep that under the rug because, like, well, who knows? It's just me. Right. And then as you continue to do that, I find that it becomes harder to trust what you say you're going to do because you're so used to not keeping your word. So I find that, like, just helps for to just sort of build that confidence and that strength, and that's, like, self-care and self-love of making sure that I am just feeling amazing and taking, the best care of myself, because nobody can want, your wellness and well-being more than yourself. Right? Like, at the end of the day, people might have the great intentions. You can be inspired by other people. You can, like, love what someone's doing and say, hey, I want to do that too. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to take steps to do it, whatever that looks like, whether it's getting yourself to the gym, whether it's, making the choice to eat something healthier than, what you want to eat. Whether it's, deciding to go to see a therapist to work through some things that you maybe have on your mind, you have to be the one to do that. So I feel like just taking those steps to focus on doing those steps, to focus on your wellness, I find that those decisions become so much easier, just building those confidence and taking that step. And also just like physical changes as well, not just in terms of like looking better or anything like that, but just feeling physically better. It's so interesting sometimes how you can get so used to just being in busy mode or work mode. And the moment you just get more rest and start maybe changing what you eat or, changing your routine, how much more clarity you have, how much like more energized you feel. And I think that's one of the things why I like to ask myself, like, what are the things that energize me and what are the things that deplete me? Like, things that we eat or drink can completely change our mood. Right? Yeah. So I think that those are some like key signs as well too. Of just kind of those changes. And I think for me, another piece is that you just show up in your work just better, right? Yeah. Like, you are truly at your best, like if you're creating something amazing and you want it to be consumed in the world by other people, why not bring your best self to that thing, right? Like, is the goal really worth it once you complete it if you're too exhausted
right, exactly.
to even be able to be like celebrate it or even completely move it to the finish line? Like, I think sometimes we spend too much time, romanticizing the struggle of all of everything, and that's not to say that we don't have struggles and that life is struggle free, but I feel like we spend so much time in that, like, that grind and that grit. And it's like, but there's you could feel well in that process too, like you can, while you're grinding, focus on you too. That's okay. It doesn't have to be this A or B conversation or like this all or nothing conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of the things that come to mind. But like, ultimately, I just feel like, if we really want to, make these big impacts, in the world, it's going to require a lot of work. So why not be at your best and your strongest, mentally and physically, so you can be able to just conquer those challenges.
Yeah. You really just spoke my life's testimony right there. Like, that was literally, that's what I've seen in myself as well. And I'm finishing up a book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakiani, I think. I might butcher his name. But he was talking about just how the most extraordinary people, the people who have the most money, the best businesses, they operate in a space of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like, I feel like you definitely hit it on the head when you said we kind of romanticize the struggle or the grind, or, you know, like if you're not in pain, then you're not doing anything, or
You're
things
not
like
doing-
that.
Yeah, it's like the struggle Olympics. It's
Right.
like it's everyone's trying to like show like no.
Yeah, exactly. Or you feel like unvalidated if you are enjoying the process, if you're not, you know, and that's not the case. Like even the parts where you are struggling and things may not be going great. I've noticed, like, I used to see a lot of people like posting things aren't, I'm trying to be real on the gram and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's good to see that, but also it's also kind of nice just to be working and not have to, you know, justify what's going on in your business or in your vision or things like that. So I think it's good to just take a step back and, you know, just do what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and you definitely hit on the head as well with the confidence thing. Whether I'm being diligent in my working out, when I'm being diligent in my diet, being diligent in my spiritual life, when I'm more connected to God. When I'm connected to God, I'm a better businessman in general, because I just feel complete. You know, I feel like I'm not lacking in certain places. So it gives me that energy like, all right, good, I'm on the right track. It gives me an extra boost of something to keep, you know, focused on what I'm doing. It's kind of like you're on a roll. So definitely, I think all those things, people take this seriously. I'm talking to the listener now. Like, if you get your well-being intact, and it's not always going to be intact all the time. Don't think you have to be perfect. I put that episode out last season, at the end of last season, about consistency. It's not about being perfect. It's about not giving up on what you chose to do. That's where the consistency comes in.
Exactly. We're all playing the long game here, right?
Exactly.
You know, like this is definitely a marathon, and it's not about being 100% all the time. It's about just continuing to pick yourself up and keep going.
Right. And I always like to keep it practical here so people can apply something directly after listening to this episode. So what are some practices that some people can start right now after listening to you, after taking this seriously? What can some things they can start applying right away to help their well-being?
Yeah. So one practice that I love to do, I actually, start it with my day, like with writing intentions and also ending my day. So there are a couple of questions that I kind of use, sort of like my noticing check-in questions, which is a great way to just sort of see how you're feeling. And I also use it as a way to kind of figure out like when I may have to pivot what I'm doing. Maybe something's working, maybe something's not working. So a couple of questions that folks can write down that I love to kind of share is, first question is like, what do I need right now? Like starting my day and being like, what do I actually need? Because how often sometimes do we might ask that to other people, but when's the last time you asked that for yourself?
Yeah.
Also just like, what am I grateful for? Just the small, things, every day, there's just maybe something that maybe, even in the days when it's not going so well, you could probably always find something like a bright spot. So I like to be able to just take a moment to, express like, what are the things that I'm grateful for, like in the morning and in the evening. Another thing is like, what did I learn today? Right? Like a lot of times we might be focusing in on our work, but like, what is something maybe new that I learned? So I actively like to just kind of, use that as a way to just be intentional about like, not just being on that autopilot. And like, even if it's like the smallest little thing, just like, what are something new that I learned? Another thing that I like is just like, how am I feeling and what am I resisting? So this is a really good question, like, for any of the procrastinators who might be listening, or if you have that thing that you're supposed to be doing and you're not doing it, like, what do you, like, name it, say it out loud and start digging into, like, why am I resisting this thing, right? A really good book who talks about resistance, or an author, is Stephen Pressfield, who has some really great books about resistance. One is like Do the Work, The War of Art, Turning Pro. And I think it's a great book for like any, visionaries who are on the journey of building some amazing things, and to really get to the heart of like why sometimes we get in our own way. But also I find it's a great way just for me to sort of, check in and see like, okay, maybe I'm, afraid of something, or maybe I want to do something, but I don't know the next step. So it just helps me to sort of do that quick check-in. Other small things, I want to just give suggestions that are also just like things you can start doing. Because I think a lot of times we think of self-care, well-being, we think I got to spend a lot of money on something, or I have to, so I would say just ensuring that like, start from a physical perspective, like make sure you're staying hydrated throughout the day, just like drinking your water, and prioritizing like movement. Yeah. Oh yes. There you go. I have mine too.
Yep, exactly.
My green. Just, staying hydrated throughout the day, getting some movement in. Like I love working out and going to a gym, but if you don't have to go to a gym, it could be as simple as just like getting up and, going for a walk. Like I worked remotely for almost 2 years, and it's so important. It became even more important from a movement, physical health perspective for me to be super intentional about like getting up, because it's so easy. Your desk is in your house and you can just sit all day long and just, work on your things. But I have like a Fitbit that I wear, and it's more just a cue for me to like know what time it is, but also just to make it tracks, like, am I getting up and things like that. And I think one more tip I would say is just like, start making like small nutritional changes. Like I think sometimes we might be, maybe drinking too much coffee or having a lot of sugar, and just like start paying attention to like, again, from a food perspective, how do you feel after you eat different things? Like that's the quickest way, like sometimes you might be putting that milk in your coffee and not realizing that it's not making you feel good, know, or you're like, hey, I'm like feeling really tired. I'm going to grab that piece of sugar or whatever, that sweet treat. And it gives you that little high for like, 30 minutes. And then like you're an hour later, you're like, why am I tired again? Like start paying attention to those little things. Yeah. I think those are like some small changes that you can start with that are just like, you don't need any money for that. Like, it's just like quick, easy things that you can start doing. And again, it's, tied back into that, like starting to know of self, like starting to like figure out like, hey, how do I feel? Like, what is this, what works for me? So I think those are like three different things you can try. So writing, start doing that noticing practice and journaling, hydration, and focusing on nutrition.
Cool. And that you kind of just answered my next question. I think those are 3 great tips for people who are in the hustle or in this build your vision process. I was going to ask for 3 tips that you would give to anybody who is part of this process that we do in the BYV community.
I definitely think, like, as we talked about before, about that whole connection piece and just like, start thinking about, what's important, like where are different ways that you can ensure that as you're working on what you're building, that you are carving out sort of that intentional time to, whether it be connecting, as you mentioned, like spirituality is a very important, factor in your life. Mm-hmm. Like, what are some of those other non-negotiable things that are super important for you, and ensuring that you're finding a way to prioritize that. Another thing that I think, and I work with my clients and talk about, is the importance of like getting really clear about what is your definition of success. I think a lot of times we might go right into our projects and we want to focus on like, the monetary factors or like building a certain, platform. But again, as we're striving and working, like how clear are you on what you're working towards? Like, what is that actual end goal for you? Because you could be building something very similar to somebody else and you might have 2 completely separate goals. But if you don't have that clarity on what it is and that vision that you're creating, you'll be so likely to just sort of follow and kind of blow wherever the wind sort of takes you. Yeah. Right. So, make sure that you've like paused and you are super, super clear on like what it is that you're trying to create, cause then you can really truly hustle with intention. Cause this is what's important to me. If you need to take a break, like you'll know that you won't feel bad about it. You're not focusing on the same, metrics of success as somebody else. And I think as well of just like acknowledging, who you are and what your identity is outside of all the things that you do. Because I think we're also live in a world now about everybody is like a an entrepreneur, has a side hustle, or
Right.
has a thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so important to remember that like all those things are amazing, but outside of that, there's some really amazing things about yourself too. And taking that time to turn inward and like, you know, what is your identity? What are the things that you love to do outside of, you know, the vision and the business and the things that you're building? You know, there's a great article, I think it was by The Atlantic, that talked about the whole concept of workism. And workism is like, then we kind of associate our identity to our job or our career. Right. So I think it's so important to just like know that those are the things that we do and we're very passionate about it. But like knowing that your whole identity and who you are and your self-worth is not attached to that. And I think that sometimes that it contributes to people's feeling of just like burnout or when things don't go well in their business, they take it so personally because you've intertwined your entire self-worth and identity. And to know that that's not just, it's a part of you, but it's not who you are completely. So, you know, prioritizing like, you know, what do you love to do? What are the things that you value? And that's why like knowing what are those things are and like making time and space for those things in your life are so important.
Yeah, that's great. And this is the question I love to ask all my guests on the show because they're great people and they amaze me with this question. So if you had a billboard and everybody driving down wherever you live in Canada, I don't know where the highways are there, but everyone sees this billboard sponsored by you, and there's a message that you want everyone that sees it to know, what would be the message that you would want to send out to the world? Like a phrase or something like that.
I would say, like what I said earlier, is like be the person that you needed when you were younger.
Oh, see, I knew it. See, everyone just comes with the heat on that question, man. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Be the person that you needed when you were younger. I feel like that would change a lot of things in the world we live in. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And lastly, what's just been the most rewarding part of you pursuing your vision for your life? Lots of people are in that pursuit, but you're doing something now that you love and that you care about. What's been the most rewarding part of that for you?
Seeing, you know, just getting to know this new person, like just getting to know myself every year, I think has been the most rewarding. When I think back to, you know, couple years ago to the young woman who was struggling with their mental health and who like really didn't see a way out of like the feelings and emotions that she had, to, you know, being a person who is championing wellness for others, but like championing wellness for herself. I think that has been the most rewarding, is just to see the way that I've fought for my life and fought for my well-being and have championed that pain and those tests into strength and, you know, a testimony to help others. I think that's been the most rewarding, to defy my own expectations, and to be able to do it in a way that where I feel confident in myself and like have the ability to take what I've learned and what I continue to want to learn and continue to want to do, to be able to help others to be able to do the same in their lives. I think that's what's been the most rewarding piece, is to just be like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here.
I hope this episode emphasized why it is so important for you as a visionary to take wellness seriously. As your vision actualization mentor, I want the best for you in your vision. I want you to be happy, healthy, and prosperous. If you have any questions about the Visionary Wellness Plan or anything that was said in this episode, feel free to contact me or Chivon. Our contact information will be in the show notes. Share this episode with a friend who you feel needs some more wellness in their life, and start applying the practices today. I know I will. All right, I'll talk to you on Friday, and we'll be addressing the most popular question I get as a coach and mentor in that episode. But until then, keep building your vision every day. Peace. Hey guys, Clee here. Thanks so much for listening to the Build Your Vision podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would think you did if you stayed all the way to the end. The best thing that you could do to help support this show is by sharing it with somebody. By you just taking a few seconds to recommend this show to somebody, you are making a huge impact, not only on the success of this show, but possibly on that person's life.